revenge or the motive for revenge lasts. You can't sustain yourself for a very long time, and in fact you may therefore end up taking up issues and working in a way in which does greater harm to you than and to the movement and the struggle than anything else. So there are many issues that also throw up. And one of the most important issues that for any soldier and for any army, either state or for the militants, is a question of motivation. What motivates people? How do you sustain motivation? And what is the nature of difference between the motivation of a soldier and a rebel? It's this that war also encourages and obliges us to do. Why? Indian Army is considered, there's a brilliant book by Philip Mason on British Indian Army and its history, how it came into being. It's a brilliant book. It's supposed to be a classic untold. Philip Mason's called British Indian Army. Anybody who's interested in it should check it out. One of his important theses is how British succeeded in creating a mercenary force. A mercenary force which could even offer its life while it is working for cash, that it could sacrifice its life for regimental honor, for the honor and pride of the officer who commanded it. So they made Indian Army, the British Army, made mercenary a very honorable term. That's why you had 75,000 British officers and 150,000 Indian soldiers could control 350 million Indians. You needed local support, and you had plenty of it. The same, one would have expected post 47 the things ought to have changed. Then the composition would have changed. That the representative character of the army and the forces would have undergone a change. That the wars against our own people would not have taken place. Right? There would be other ways in which you would be able to negotiate and resolve those issues. That did not happen. What did in fact happen is, therefore, the wars became a problem. Now, so motivation is a very, very important issue. So why is it? When you look at, it's a weak force, it's a small force compared to the Indian state, which is fighting against, say for instance, the Maoists in 9 states of India. The number of districts now where from the excess of 200, I mean there was a point where the Indian government went into hyperbole and claimed that 260 districts have reported Maoist or Naxal activities, etc., etc. So whatever remotely happened was all brought in. Now they've brought it down to 80 districts. But 80 districts is not a small number, spread over 9 states. And with more than between 300,000 to 400,000 Indian troops, comprising different kind, border security forces, central paramilitary forces, Indo-Tibetan border police, national security guards, then what is called the state armed forces. These are all armed police trained by the British. You know, Robert Peel did a wonderful thing for the colonized people. He brought in community policy for England. But the same Robert Peel was the founder of community policy in England in the 19th century, also propounded this new concept of policing for colonies, and which was modeled on the Irish constabulary, a paramilitary formation. Paramilitary formation which is trained like an infantry battalion of the army. So when we talk about police in India, and even when you look at our budget, there is this category that appears in the Ministry of Home Affairs written police. So we think that these are civilians, you know, the police, bed and wearing, maybe with a pistol or something, but these are not. These are heavily armed. And these police forces have the kind of weaponry which rebels, can only dream of. All kind of weaponry which is available. Now to fight this force, with what? Only 3 weapons that are available to the guerrillas. So the motivation, it becomes even more important for them. And what are those 3 weapons? AK-47s, which is the weapon, favorite of the rebels world over. Thanks to Kalashnikov, he popularized a weapon which in the hands of a rebel made him so much more effective. in close combat. IED, improvised explosive devices. And AK-47, IED. There's a third.
Handmade bomb?
I'm sorry?
House-made bomb?
No, those would be considered part of IEDs. It'll just come to me. These are the only three, broadly, these are the three weapons generally used by world over, primarily by and grenade launchers. These are the three weapons that generally the guerrillas have used against a very formidable force.
Grenade launchers have been used in India?
Sorry?
Grenade launchers have been used in
Yeah.
RPGs.
And in fact, the guerrillas use it themselves also. They made out...
the RPGs even, rocket propelled grenades.
Yeah, but these are all looted from the armories. Please understand that 95% of all the weapons in the possession of the Maoists, and now the Kashmiri insurgents, which they have learned from the Maoist style, I think, is that now they don't have to import or purchase from international arms trade. There's so much of weapon in the armories. It's looting them that provides you. So RPGs and all have not because they bought it, because these have been looted from the armories and it has come into their possession. That's why. These are the three major. But these weapons are not the mainstay of any movement, no matter what we say. Because with this weapon, when you're fighting a formidable enemy, which is, the Indian Intelligence Bureau claims, according to their latest figure of how many Maoists there are, they have brought it down to saying that there are 4,000 armed cadres. Against them, if you have 300,000 to 400,000, it's a very formidable. It's virtually 1 to 100. One rebel, 100 soldier for one rebel, which is double the what is advocated in classical counter-insurgency doctrines. They say 50 should be the maximum, 30 to 50. 50 is the upper limit. In India, we have gone, and it's going to keep on increasing, because that is the Indian contribution to counter-insurgency, by the way. That's a separate story, but it's interesting. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not the nature of the weapons counts, is the people and their motivation, what they are fighting for, and how they fight, because they don't have wages. A Maoist rebel doesn't join the PLGA for money. When he is recruited, he is told the only thing you'll gain is the love and respect of the people, and that is what we are asking you to join. You won't get wages, you won't get any of the privileges that the soldier of the CRPF or others enjoy. And compare and contrast the motivation of the CRPF soldiers which are deployed to fight against the Maoists, and look at the motivation of the Maoists, and then tell me whether it doesn't tell you a story also about how determined are the people to fight despite knowing that they're fighting a formidable force, a mighty force. And their chances of victory are not certain. But they look at the way in which they fight, and look at the level of motivation and lack of it amongst the paramilitary forces, because people want, this is another part of the story. Why is it that people join paramilitary forces? Why is it the largest number of jobs in the government sector in India is being opened up in the armed police and armed services, not in post and telegraph, not in Indian Railways. In Indian Railways, there is vacancies of more than 100,000 vacancies, which were not filled. In Post and Telegraph Department, which is another very big department, millions. Indian Railways employs
1.6 million people.
1.6 million people directly, and probably an equivalent amount indirectly. It's a huge manpower that is employed. Look at the employment generation and the vacancies that are left there, and where new posts are being created, and look at where the budget allocations are going, and it tells you a story also that people are being encouraged, that the only jobs opportunities that are coming by them in larger numbers than other places is in the armed services. So you have, an army has a recruitment rally for say 200 posts, you will have 25,000 people lined up. There's such desperation for jobs. So people just join because it's a government service. They're oblivious of the war and where they'll be deployed. It's when they get recruited and then they get deployed in these war zones and they fight, then suddenly they say, we sign to fight. But we don't know who we are fighting. And they've also complained that it's to fight amongst people where we can't distinguish between a guerrilla and a civilian is impossible for us. So it's not as if the soldiers are all zombies or they are heartless or... No, that's not the point. But I'm saying is that their motivation therefore is very different. And this contrasts. Now in such a